Had this drink. It was an energy drink. It had a lot of protein in it. It was for bodybuilders. It was called Extreme Ripped Fuel, right? And if you had this, it has your proteins, it has all your amino acids, it has all your vitamins and minerals, man. I'm just gonna go have some pata. It also had some like stimulant in it. It's a stimulant. But it's also, so is crack, so is meth, so is speed, so is coffee. Or caffeine, they're stimulants. Well, this is a pretty high stimulant. Well, there's a 16-year-old kid. Now, what's happening when you're 16 years old? What? Puberty, right? Your hormones, this thing right here is just barely like figuring out. Any parents in here that have teenagers, you're like, holy cow, this is just up and down all the time. Their brains are learning how to process information. Well, this one kid, I thought he was just joking around, but he's like, he had this, he took an energy drink, and he's like, woo! And we're like, man, it's just a placebo effect. He's thinking it's going to affect him. But he was so, I mean, he was like zoned out, man. It was serious. We had to actually calm him down. And, since they've illegalized Mao Wong in drinks anymore. So I think Minnesota Vikings this was about 5 years ago during summer camp, some of their linemen died of pseudoephedrine products that they had, energy drink type stuff. So, again, it goes back to the chemistry of the brain and how much it can handle.
What's the best way to recover from drugs?
The best way to recover from detox, you got to get it out of your system. Because the longer it's in your system, now every drug's different. Some drugs are out of your system like that. What do you use? Abstinence? Let's see. What's that? God. There you go. Physically, what do you use to get rid of the drug out of your system? There's a hamburger juice. Yeah, raw. That's gross. Hamburger juice is blood, man. You don't want to. Oh, cranberry juice. Oh, okay. I don't know. It depends on the drug. Alcohol. It takes an hour for every drink. Which one drink is about a 1 ounce shot. That's one serving of alcohol. Or one beer, which is about the equivalent, same amount of alcohol. It'll take an hour for your liver to process that. Now, your liver is what actually filters all these chemicals out of your body. So it takes time for your liver to do that. Alcohol is one of the quickest ones, though. Some of these drugs will stay with you they're lipid soluble, which means they store in your fat, or they transport through your body in fat. And so some of these will actually, like acid, back in the old acid trip days in the 70s and 60s, some of these people are having flashbacks because it's stuck. Some of that substance was lipid soluble, so it's stored in their fat deposits in their body. And then when they exercise or whatever it was that it finally came out, maybe 20, 30 years later, they'd have like a little flash. They'd experience the drug again. It happened. And so some drugs are water soluble. They transport through the body through water means. Some go straight to the brain from the blood. Some store in your fat. Does that make sense? So it depends on what kind of drug. How do you get the drug out of your system? I don't know, man. Just cough. They say coffee. That's a myth. You need time. That's the only thing you need is time. So, opiates. Again, opiate has its own receptors in here, but they're lipid soluble as well. So they can kind of stay longer in your system because water soluble stuff gets out with your water fairly quickly. We have to replace our water so much because water goes in and out very quickly. Fat soluble stuff, like some vitamins and some drugs, will stay in our system a lot longer. So opiates will stay in your system longer. Where are they stored at? No, they're not stored necessarily, but they'll be distributed throughout the body through your blood. But some of it can be stored in the fats. But most of it's going to be happening right here in the brain. Those 100 billion spark plugs. Most of it's going to be happening right there. Some of it stays in there a long time. It just keeps communicating for a long period of time. Some of them just happen really quickly. So some drugs give you a really high, like really quick high. Some of them give you a long, lasting high, because it's a matter of how long these little chemicals stay in your brain, or how long it's in your brain acting like the chemical. Does that make sense? Opiates do the same thing. And opiates actually back in the day were painkillers. We still use opiate kind of strands. We use the backbone of an opiate, and then we change the molecular structure so it's not as addictive, right? Painkillers, so they say, Oxycontin, Vicodin. I think someone mentioned Vicodin over here. They can be they're like opiate. They act on the opiate receptors, and they numb our pain.
Women get addicted faster and it's harder for them to quit.
Alcohol, absolutely. Alcohol. I feel like I'm going. Am I going too long? You sure? Okay. Alcohol. I hate to say this. Is gender. The effects of alcohol are determined by gender, ethnicity, height, weight. There's a lot of different issues. Women have less of an enzyme inside of their liver and inside their stomach that digests alcohol. Asian populations have less of this as well. So some ethnicities, they feel the flush, they feel the effects of alcohol more so than others. I'm not going to say addiction necessarily, but the effects. And the effects is what makes us addicted, because if it's a good effect, we want to keep feeling that feeling, right? So women sometimes, women actually on average have less ability to digest alcohol or to process the alcohol, filter it, and so it stays in their system longer. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Why government doesn't do much to protect our kids at schools, and how we can protect our children?
Schools, man. Whew. Well, first of all, you're talking to someone who's in the school, the educational system. We're underfunded. You guys hear that everywhere, huh? But something as important as education, I wanted to come in here and I wanted to tell you what drugs do on a physical level. Because, we hear things like, drugs are bad. Don't do drugs. I don't need drugs to compete. Things like that, right? We hear this, but we never hear the why. I wanted to come in here and kind of tell you why drugs can be damaging. Does that make sense? And if you understand the why, maybe you can make a more informed decision. So it all starts with education. How do we educate our youth so that maybe they just know that if they do make that choice, they know the consequences or potential consequences? You're still free to do it, though, if that's what you choose to do, right? But at least now you'll know, you won't be ignorant to it. You'll know what the potential risks, hazards are. Does that make sense? Why does the government not put as much money into our educational system? It's a value system, apparently. I don't know. That's pure politics. I don't know if... Yeah. And they're taking a lot of funding from education and from healthcare services. It's not just kids. It's our, adults are obese too. Adults don't have the education to eat right, sleep right, exercise. They don't have that. They don't. So how do we educate not just our youth, but all of our world to find better value systems, to educate? I'm going maybe way beyond my scope, but how do you lose weight? Oh, okay. Am I boring anybody? Why do you... Oh, yeah, that's weird, huh? You get the munchies off of a drug and you eat, but here's the thing. People, like especially meth. Have you guys ever walked to downtown Portland and you see this, hey, got a dollar? And they're like tweaking? They're tweakers. They're tweaking, right? I'm serious. That's a terminology. They're tweaking out, man. And they're scary because they're like, hey, man, and they're sunken in. They're malnourished. If that drug has such a power, and this goes to your question, if that drug has such a power over someone, you're more concerned about getting that drug in you than you are about nutrition, sleep, anything else. Does that make sense? Am I right? It's your number one priority. And, there's lab rats. We learn a lot from our animal friends. I don't know if it's ethical necessarily, but we do a lot of research on rats. And because they're easy to produce and they're fairly, well, I'll move on. But anyway, they hooked this rat up, and I'm talking about dopamine, right? Dopamine is one of those, the natural pleasure thing. It gives us our rewards. Well, they put electrodes in the dopamine center of their brain, and every time the mouse pushed this, they had a little button over here. The mouse had a button that would ignite that and give him pleasure, or he would have a button over here that gave him food. They found that in a high percentage of these rats, Some rats would be so preoccupied with just pushing that pleasure thing that they'd lose sight of eating, drinking, anything. So they became so preoccupied by that dopamine. Now, what we learned from that is that the chemistry of our brain is very, very powerful. And a reward keeps our human species moving. Does that make sense? If it's pleasurable to eat. Why? Because, well, it keeps us nourished.